Boom. I think we're live, man. I think we're ready to roll. So Matthew Leffler, what's up, my man?
Gunnar, it's great to be here. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Usually I do these in the morning. I have a little bit more energy, but now it's in the evening and I have even more energy. So it's perfect time. Perfect
That's
time.
right. It's always a good time to talk about transportation, supply chain, law, whatever comes up. It's exciting.
Sure. And we'll talk about all that. But first, I'm gonna give everybody a chance to share this. I'm gonna give myself a chance to share this. But in the in between, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, had no clue that you was such the athlete. So high school,
That's
so high
right.
school, football and track and field,
That's right.
captain of the team,
That's
all
right.
state. So I
That's
mean,
right.
you're no slouch. So we share a
I
little bit there too.
I'll tell you a story. So what age were you when you learned about what it meant to be the best? For me, it was
Oh,
kindergarten. And
so I
what
would have to say, so real quick, my sister is in the Hall of Fame for softball at the same college I went to. So, and she's 17 years older than me. She says
Wow.
16. I always say 17. So she's 17 years older than me. So I was literally born when she was a senior in high school playing volleyball. And my probably first steps were at the ball field. So I've always been like that. My dad was huge on both of us, just taking the bull by the horns. But go ahead.
Well, the thing for me was it was kindergarten when we did the mile run. And so we would time it, and you'd every time you'd finish it, they'd post it on the wall who got first. And it mattered very much to me to be the fastest. So in first grade, in kindergarten, second grade, I was the fastest miler. So in high school, I was a quarter miler. I ran one time around the giant oval. And I'm 5'6", so I had some let's say vertical challenges to compete with some other folks. But my claim to fame was in 2003. I was the second fastest quarter miler in the state of Illinois. I got a
Ooh.
scholarship to go compete at Western Michigan at the Mid-American Conference Division One. It was at that school when they called us in the middle of a December evening to let us know that the program was being canceled because most people don't want to watch adult men running ovals. And I learned that the hard way.
Sure. Hey, I get that. It might not be as exciting as people clashing into each other in football or being able to hit a home run in baseball or whatever, or shooting a basket, but it's a very talented skill, and not everyone's fast. Not everyone gets to be fast.
That's right. Well, the thing
You
about
can't.
sports I like about it is it's about being an individual contributor. So if someone's in the sales business, you know exactly what that means. You have to go out there and you have to work harder than your competitors. And that's what being an athlete teaches you is that you just got to put the work in. You might not be the fastest or the strongest or the most agile, but hard work can compensate for a lot. And that's what I've always set myself apart with is how hard I'm willing to work to get the outcome that I need.
That's the biggest thing right there, man. You got to be able to work hard, and that's why I love athletes. I love people from military, people with police backgrounds. I don't know if it's the structure or what it is. They're trying to rise to the top, but usually your salespeople are going to come from that background to be the most successful. Would you agree with that for the most part?
Absolutely. You need people who have structure, who understand what it means to be, here's the objective. Now, I'll say this about the men and women in service. I deeply admire their commitment and what they've done for our country. I never served. I'm not a pacifist. I am a coward. And I want to be very clear about that. I there you go. Absolutely. But you're right. Like some of the best mechanics I ever had came out of the military and they could get anything operational. And that's what you need in some of these roadside events. So that kind of
Sure.
mentality of getting something done is what you find in people that have served and people that have done athletics.
So my fiance, she's a Marine, and you
Ooh.
don't say was a Marine. You do say is a Marine. I've learned that. You all right? And she would definitely beat my ass. So I don't mess with her, man. I don't get in her way. So and she's awesome. She's in logistics and she does a great job too. So I
What does
mean,
she
I
do in
think it
logistics?
hand in hand. So she's a fleet manager. She actually works for a company called First Fleet. Yep. So
Okay.
so she kind of works at night and I work during the days. And we've got a 6 year old, so we're kind of balancing schedules. But it's crazy, but it's fun.
There is nothing more challenging than safely delivering freight on time and undamaged. Fleet operations, fleet management, this is a very, very essential work. No one can opt out of the supply chain. It is everything. So bless her for what she's doing. And I'm glad you have a I got a 6-year-old too. I got a 9-year-old
That's
as
awesome.
well. Yeah, I'm in man-to-man coverage right now. That might be changing. It might be changing. We're gonna keep
Uh-oh.
looking forward.
Okay. All right, man. Well, hey, so how'd you get into transportation? Obviously, you went through school, smart guy, athletic, went to Michigan or Michigan State, you got your
Mhm.
law degree there.
Yep.
How'd you get into transportation?
So my father is a second generation guy. So his father was a truck driver, and my dad got his business degree from NIU, Northern Illinois, and went to work at Roadway. So he started at Roadway in 1976 as a nighttime supervisor for their maintenance operations in Chicago. This is before deregulation. So when you were in the old days, there were 3 trucking companies that everyone knew about: Yellow, Roadway, and Consolidated Freight, CF. And so Dad was with Roadway for many years. He went on to work at a company called Airborne, which later became DHL, but it was Airborne when he was there. And in the early 90s, there was this trend of outsourcing certain functions that a fleet does. And so we see this all the time with different companies, but what he ended up doing was forming a company called Outsource Fleet Services, so that if someone wanted to outsource fleet services, they could find him. And we started off as the largest provider of maintenance for a company called RPS. So that's Roadway Package Systems. That eventually became FedEx Ground. So everyone wants to know, what do the best in the world do? Well, the best in the world outsource when it's not their core competency. And so we were one of the biggest vendors for FedEx. We got into work for people like SEVA and Old Dominion. So my own background is I started off at University of Illinois, got my degree from them, went to Michigan State to get a law degree so I could postpone being an adult. I practiced law for about 2.5, 3 years. And then I went to work in-house with my father. I started off with things like accounts payable and collections. I started doing things with billing, understanding our TMT software. And then I learned about the customer. And I have become obsessed with this industry. It is the most essential and important job out there. And so you don't opt out of the supply chain. And that's how I got into this. So I'm here. Once you join the supply chain, you don't get to get out of it.
No, man, you don't. So I had no clue what legit. All I did was sports, man. My whole life, there's like, you don't got to have a job. You play sports, we'll take care of you. Just get to college, get your degree. I get my degree. All I know is football. I don't know anything. So I end up falling into logistics on accident. And then I was like, this is a plan B. I'm gonna try to do pro wrestling, all this stuff. And then, this ended up becoming a pretty lucrative career. Like, this is a pretty awesome job to have. Like, you can make logistics and you can go as far as you want to, and you can learn everything you want about business in this career.
Well, the thing I love about what we've seen in supply chain over the last couple of years. So before this last 30 years, we've been telling people, you come into supply chain, this is an industry you shouldn't be a part of. Working on the dock, driving a truck, fixing a vehicle. But the reality is supply chain is everything. It is all of the things. It is warehousing. It is distribution. It is retail. And you have someone like Amazon come in and say, we're going to change the way people buy. Not because we want them to do that, it's because that's what the customer wants. The customer wants to be met at the doorstep. And Amazon changed the way we expect things to be delivered, how we buy things, and then the supply chain has to adjust. And that adjustment is this continuous innovation. I look at people like Tyler Robertson over at Diesel Laptops. They're making diagnostics sexy. That's awesome. And so if you want to get a job in a career that's going to always be advancing, supply chain is that thing. It's warehousing, manufacturing, distribution, autonomous vehicles. It is all of the things.
Yeah. So I had Jim Tompkins on the show the other day, and he's been in it for 50 years.
Wow.
The knowledge that he put out was crazy. Like, he's written 31 books about supply chain and leadership and different ways in it. And he's done every aspect of it. Just sitting with him for an hour, I learned quite a bit. So that's the whole play here, trying to get as many people on the show, on the LinkedIn platform, because not a lot of people use it for this, and just talk about logistics, talk about supply chain, talk about warehousing. And the reason I wanted to bring you on, the reason I think you wanted to come on as well, is there's this thing going on, right, in logistics right now, and it's the end non-competes, and I believe that you're in agreement with it.
That's right. That's right.
So
absolutely,
you're in agreement, and so am I. In Tennessee, and I don't know why we don't really care about it that much. It's not that big of a deal, I don't think. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I haven't had people that have, like, you can get out of it pretty easy, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But these non-solicits is where things kind of pop up. So what I want you to do, I'm going to back up. I'm going to ask questions, and I want to learn. And I just want to know, what the hell is a non-compete, and what the hell is a non-solicit, and what's the difference between the both of them?
Yes, absolutely. So this is what the Armchair Attorney is all about. My goal with the Armchair Attorney is to take complicated or somewhat complex terms of art and explain them. So this thing of a non-solicit and a non-compete are a type of animal. And the type of animal that they are what we call post-employment restrictive covenants. That is exactly what it describes. It's after employment, post-employment restrictive. You had a right, you gave it up. and covenant. It's a contract. These are labor agreements. And in many contexts, these are in all sorts of deals, whether they're part of a non-disclosure. Maybe the employer, when you're getting hired, says you have to sign these documents to work with us. Sometimes they're explained, sometimes they're not. And their enforceability really requires three specific things. The first thing is how long? How long am I bound by this restrictive contract? The second thing is how wide, how expansive? Is it my county? Is it my state? Is it the nation? Is it the world? And then the final thing is, what's the business? So you can imagine a world where the business might be described as brokering freight, or the business might be described as fixing machines. The business can't be, generally speaking, anything we want to do whenever we want to do it. Because if you were to quit your job as a freight broker and say, I want to be an HVAC guy, and I want to call on a company that has a business that needs HVAC services, that would maybe run afoul of that non-solicit. So they have to have those three things have to be reasonable, and they have to be kind of tailored for the specific person they're going to have. The dark side of these contracts is that some companies know that they're not enforceable, but they'll still make you sign them, and they'll still threaten you with a letter or some potential litigation, knowing that you would be too afraid, or at least not wanting to spend the money for a lawyer to fight them. These are very, very bad documents. They make a lot of sense in certain circumstances. A good example, when I sold my business of fixing trucks and trailers back in 2018, I signed a non-competition agreement, because when they buy your company, they say, hey, we love the company that you built. Don't ever do it again until this contract expires. I get it. I get it. But if you're making $50,000 a year and you're signing a document that says you can't provide for your families, it's bullshit. It's not fair. And non-competes is about bringing to light this abusive practice of using the law to punish people for trying to leave the business.
Okay. So I'm very simple-minded. All right. So let's break this down a little bit. A non-compete means pretty much you can't go work for a company in the same industry that you're in. Is that kind of the play?
Yeah. So generally what the non-compete tells you is that you're not allowed to work with someone who competes with your former company. So if you're the best example is like if you are brokering freight and then you sign a non-competition agreement and you go work for the biggest competitor. You can't do that. You can generally stay in the same industry. Maybe you go inside of the fleet. That might be different. So it's not about industry specific. It's more about what does your company generate revenue off of? Don't go do that. That's what the non-competition agreement means. The non-solicit, it has two parts to it. The non-solicit may be, don't try to hire my employees. So you got to come to my company. You met a bunch of really awesome people. You know which ones are the 80-20 rule. You know who's productive and who's not. You can't come and hire them. That's the solicitation of my employees. The non-solicitation of customers is different. That says you at your role here learned a whole bunch of companies that work with me. Don't call on them. Don't do that. Now, there's another caveat which we could talk about, which is maybe you bring customers with you. Maybe you have a book of business. If you sign a non-solicit, you may be giving your book of business to your current employer, who will keep them when they're not your employer. Those are, again, not great outcomes for anybody.
Sure. Yeah. So pretty much it's protecting the companies, and it's terrible for the customers and the employees.
Absolutely. It's bad for the shareholders too. Here's a good example. There's a company called Kites. Great company. Supply chain visibility. That's amazing. The algorithm, so good. Kites, I hope you're watching. There's another company called There's a company called Project 44. They also do the supply chain visibility. This is a case that is actively going on right now in Cook County. And here's what happened. 2 people left Kites. One had been there for 6 months. One had been there for about a year. They joined Project 44. Kites likely sent a cease and desist letter. That letter was ignored. And so what the folks ended up doing at Kites was suing these people who had gone to work for Project 44. This is why it's so bonkers. Because imagine you're making whatever you're making, you're a middle manager, you're a cog in the machine, you're an implementation manager, and a sheriff shows up to your house or your company. And they say, I'm going to serve you with process because you're going to be sued. And this lawsuit doesn't take place in normal like civil litigation or in the law division or municipal. It happens in chancery. What happens in this case is Forkites is telling Project 44 and asking the judge to do this, fire these people, ban them from working from Project 44. We need a restraining order. And what they're saying in this actual case is that they're going to suffer irreparable harm. That's a term of art, irreparable harm, if these two people work at Project 44. If your business is going to be irreparably harmed by hiring two people, you have a very dumb business. It's a very dumb business.
So I heard you say that in your YouTube video where you were talking about non-competes, and you said irreparable harm, and I was like, what is that? And you go, let me break it down for you. Pretty much that means if these people leave, our company goes bye-bye.
That's right.
That's pretty much what.
That's irreparable
so you're
harm.
telling me it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that these big companies would say that.
This is the reality. Was like these contracts were never pervasive in any industry. But what employers learned was being at will wasn't enough power for most companies. The companies wanted to find another way to limit what you do. And that's where these post-employment restrictive covenants come in. Most courts don't like them. They don't want to see restrictions on labor. But many courts will say, but you signed it. You agreed. Why are you fighting it now? Why did you not fight it then? Not realizing or not identifying that most people don't understand or know how to negotiate those documents. But this irreparable harm thing, this was used when people sold businesses. Like if I got bought and I made the exact same company tomorrow and said to all my old customers, hey, I'm here, come work with me, that could cause irreparable harm. Or if you're a VP or a senior VP or someone with access to really interesting trade secrets or the ideas of what the future of the company might look like, maybe irreparable harm, but not for brokers, not for managers. It's baloney. It's garbage. And they know it's garbage. They know it's garbage.
No, I love that you're so passionate about it because I am too. And here's the reason why. Here's kind of like stirred me up into the whole controversy. So, Chattanooga, I don't know if you know anything about Chattanooga.
Great alley, buddy.
Okay, so yeah, so you know it. So the scenic city, Chattanooga, you're here. I'm born and raised here. My whole family's here. People get into logistics around here, and there's a bunch of companies that have popped up over the years, and they move around. We have friends in other companies, and some companies will tell you, hey, if this employee goes to this other company, you cut off communication with him. You no longer talk to that person. And they'll send out these company-wide emails saying, you can't talk to this person anymore. It's like, hey, bro, well, first of all, that's my friend. Now, I'm not saying this has happened to me. I've worked at two great places. I've worked at two very fantastic places that are very understanding, and they don't do all this stuff. But I have good friends that don't work at great places, and they've been in this situation where companies have almost tried to come after them for having relationships with employees that were their friends prior to even being there. And then it goes into a deeper section. So you've got the non-compete, and I understand that. And you got the non-solicit. Don't really understand that. But they'll not have a non-compete, have a long non-solicit. But it's like buried in the paperwork, and nobody knows what they're signing because they're coming out of college, and they're just like, dude, pay me 35 grand, and I'll sign whatever you want. Boom, let me get this job at this place that lets me drink beer on Fridays. So,
or jeans on Fridays, not the company culture. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I got my Hawaiian t-shirt on. I'm drinking my Coors Light at 3:30, and we're listening to techno music. So, like, how would you go about that? Like, what's your thoughts on the people that don't have a non-compete but have a long non-solicit?
So the non-solicits, generally speaking, should not last more than a year if they're actually being done. And most courts are not going to uphold this. Again, this is not legal advice. This is just giving people kind of the lay of the land. If you have a non-solicit, it's important to understand it before you sign it. So my advice to everybody is if you are presented with these documents, request at least a day or 2 days or a week to review them and understand what they actually mean. The non-solicits of not poaching your old company's talent. That is not about like being friends with them. You can talk with them. What you can't do is say, hey, come work for me. That's solicitation. You can't do that if you've agreed to the non-solicit for the employees. For the customers, it's a little bit different. Usually you want to identify the specific customers you're not allowed to solicit. Because if you're a salesperson and you're talking to this group of accounts and a different colleagues working a different group, that non-solicit shouldn't bind you from people you don't know. So the other group of people that your former company is working with. The main thing is, if you see these documents, you need to be upfront as an employer that you want these to be signed. You should tell them to get legal advice, because in most of these contracts, they actually say both parties had time to consult with counsel. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. You know they didn't. And so this is the kind of hypocrisy that we see in the business. For younger people coming in this profession, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We fucked it up. We make these documents all over the place for everything. I have seen non-competes on mechanics. That's absurd. A good example that Nordstrom Rack dealt with a couple years ago was this thing called Trunk Club. And Trunk Club was a designer. You would send in your pictures and they would give you designs. And they made the designers sign non-competes and they sued them. It's absurd. They're damaging. They're not helpful. And the more people understand what they are, and then we call out companies like Forkites who continually hound people and abuse the judicial system to protect themselves from actual competition is what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we just need to be very transparent with what people are signing. Like, we don't make our people sign either, just to be completely transparent. Like,
good for you.
So, and here's the reason why, and it's because we're going to put all the ownership on our leadership team. So I don't know if you know Jocko Willink. I'm assuming you're a reader. You like to read. Do you like to read?
I do.
Okay. So Jocko Willink, his book Extreme Ownership, the Navy SEAL. You've got to take extreme ownership, and I believe as a company that starts with your customers, the accounts that you have. If leadership and your executives and your owners and your presidents don't have a relationship with those customers, then how are they the company's customers if you're the owner, right, the leader, the executive of the company? So if those people don't have a relationship, and Joe Blow has a relationship down here that you don't really care about, you're only paying them this amount of money and a little bit of a commission, but when they're ready to go and take that customer somewhere, oh no, now they're so important, I got to go after them, I got to sue them. But it's not really that big of a deal, right? Because you didn't even have a relationship with the customer. That's why the customer wants to go with Joe Blow, right? Like that's the game.
Perfectly. We want to help the customer. We don't want to put any barriers in front of helping the customer. And what I would caution any company that has these non-competitions and even some of the non-solicits is that, do you really want the reason why people stay at your company because they're afraid you might sue them? Do you want that? No, that's not the kind of reason you want people to be motivated to work for you. And it will be the case in 3 or 4 years, maybe shorter, that companies realize this was a stupid practice to begin with. We never should have done it, and we're going to stop doing it. And that's what takes leadership. It takes real leadership. And I'm glad that your company has seen the light and understands that you don't get people to stay with you through coercive contracts. They stay because they like the environment, they like what they're doing, they like the value they bring to customers.
Yeah, and look, I get it. I understand why companies would want to do it. Like, I do understand that, especially the higher up you are, the founders. Like, I put out a poll on LinkedIn the other day, and it got, like, I don't know, it was like 70% of people said, they should end non-solicits as well as non-competes. And the people that were saying that we shouldn't do that, founder, owner, president, founder, owner, president, founder. And it was like all the same company. Like 30% of them were like from the same company. So, I mean, and that company is also the company out there talking about non-competes, not to point any fingers, but I'm just, hey man, that's what I do. You bring pro wrestling to LinkedIn, bring it to logistics. That's what happens.
That's right. This is a full contact sport. Supply chain's full contact. I get why leadership wants to put these in place. They want to minimize risk. They want to make sure that they're going to pay you whatever they pay you, but it's having an employee is like having a partner, like you're dating somebody. And the way that these non-competes and non-solicits work is they say, well, I understand that we don't get along anymore. We need to see other people. But by the way, don't see anyone else like me at all. And don't talk to my friends. Don't do those two things. And I understand that desire to control people after they've left your employment. But you have to be able to say, if you love something, you have to let it go. Let it go. Let the non-solicit go. If you are worried your customers will go away because of a relationship or just the way that a person handled a contact, you should have given them more money. That's what sales is about. You can't stop someone from exercising their skill, their craft, their trade. And if they could do it with drivers, they would. If they could do it with drivers, they would, but they can't. So they go to the next one. We'll look at the brokers, the managers, or the salespeople, and they're everywhere. I have been in so many opportunities with companies, and they'll say, you got to sign the non-compete. And I just say, I want $30,000 or more. And they say, well, we're not going to give it to you. And I go, I'm not going to sign it. And they go, really? And I go, yeah. Are we done? And they say, no, you can come work for us. That's fine.
Really? So I guess I guess a lot of people don't understand, and maybe this is where the people that are trying to get into the industry are you younger people that have just gotten in, and maybe you can figure out a way to go back if you've already signed something you don't want to sign, that you can negotiate these things. When you get to
Absolutely.
the point, and they're offering you the job, let's see the paperwork. Like you said, you need to get a day or two to review it, but let's negotiate. Okay, I'll
Absolutely.
take this non-compete. Give me $100K cash, and I'll sign
Exactly.
whatever paper you want me to sign. Right?
This is the thing that, and I would say, and I suspect the data will prove this out over time. I do think that these non-competition and non-solicits are gender discriminatory because some people, and it's something I've heard studies that some women don't negotiate as heavily and some men don't negotiate either, but everything is negotiable. Your salary, your time off, paid holidays, all of these things are part of what you as a prospective employee negotiate. These contracts are the same thing. I have helped so many people over the years help define what the term business means in terms of what the non-compete or non-solicit pertains to. But these are things you need to push back on. If you can't hire a lawyer, you don't need to. You can be an armchair attorney like me. You can just say, how much are you asking for? You want 12 months? How about we do 6? And see what they say. Or just say, I don't want to sign it. And see if they say, okay, well, you got to go. Employers need to post not just what the salary is for a job or the compensation package. They should be posting what other documents you're going to be required to sign. So you can go and say, I saw on the posting it has a non-solicit. How about you go pound sand? And then you move on.
So you think that every job posting should include the pay, the commission
Absolutely.
structure? I agree. I do agree. So what do you say about companies that are very not loose-lipped, but like tight-lipped with how much people are paid within the company? So
Oh,
say
that's a
like,
great
hey,
question.
like, because listen, now I have been here. Hey, don't talk about money at this company because if we find out we start talking about money, there's gonna be some issues. Like
Yeah.
that's been a thing.
Yeah. So this is really important for people to realize. You have a legal right to talk about compensation. Employers don't want you to do that. They don't want you to talk about what you make because what ends up happening is you realize that people are paid very differently, very differently. So why do some companies not post the price or the compensation for a role? Maybe because the people that are already doing it are paid less and they don't want to advertise that. And if they also realize this, the other factor is your compensation that you get at a new job is unreasonably factored in of your last role's compensation. So if you're making 50 and the role pays 80, but they don't post it pays 80, they come back and say, I think 60 is a good number for you. And this is a big factor because what ends up happening is you create pay discriminations or pay disparity because you're not openly talking about this. When we're talking about mechanics, it's a pay structure. It's I don't care what you do as long as you're productive at what we're asking you to do. Compensation is going to be listed as a scale. At a minimum, every role should have the scale of pay. Absolutely, it should.
No, I definitely agree with you on that, and I believe we could probably do a better job as that well. But like, just if you look at most postings in logistics, nobody has it really posted up. Maybe a few. I don't know. I'd have to do some research. Maybe a few do, but for the most part, they don't. But we all know kind of what it is.
And the thing about this is like, this is what ends up happening is when someone asks about the comp, like, okay, I saw the role, I can do the job. What the comp? People might say, are you only motivated by money? Don't you want to hear about our culture or our family that we have? Like culture doesn't put food on the table, you dummy. The only thing that puts food on the table is money. And you see Walmart out there celebrating raising rates for drivers because that is
100K,
how you,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
that's how you get drivers. That's how you get qualified applicants. You telegraph what you pay. Now, maybe someone might say, well, then my competitors know what I pay. So what? The people moving around still talk about it. They still do. Our culture has made it a stigma to talk about comp. And it's a stigma because very powerful employers prefer you not to do it. They don't want you talking about comp because at the end of the day, you realize, oh, it's kind of unfair sometimes.
Sure, and also like the higher up you get in a company and you start making decisions like that, that's part of your job too. You're selling people on coming to work for you as cheap as possible to try to get the most out of them, to try to
Oh,
get,
yeah.
that's your accounts, right? You got people, you get these large companies out that have recruiters. They're putting $100,000 into recruiting and marketing to get people out there to negotiate salaries with people and be like, hey, I got this guy. He's probably worth 110, but guess what? Got him for 65 and a decent commission plan. He's never going to touch 110. We just stole this dude. I know those are conversations that take place out there. I've heard them.
Absolutely.
I've been a part of. I know this thing. So like, it's just kind of sketchy to me that. And then they say, hey, don't be talking about your pay around here. You're gonna upset some people. Don't be doing that.
Yeah,
Don't talk about your pay.
yeah, that's a really interesting point is that we know that businesses have to make money off of us. Like when I hired mechanics, I have the rate that I charge the customer, and I have my loaded cost I pay you and all your benefits. If I'm paying the customer, if I'm getting paid less from the customer than I am to you, I go out of business. I have to make profit. I have to make some sort of margin. But it's about being open with your colleagues and your teammates. Like, this is how it works. Like, I have to pay for liability. I have to pay for health insurance, all this other stuff. So the scale is what really matters. And large enterprise companies, big publicly traded companies, most of them have pay bans for given roles because they've been sued so many fucking times that they realized, oh, I shouldn't, can I swear? Is that okay? I don't even know.
You can say whatever you want to. This is America.
Thank you, Gunnar. I'm with you. Well, the thing
hey, Elon Musk bought Twitter. You can do whatever you want to. You know what I'm saying?
He's still not there. He's okay. We have to talk about this. They have.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get there.
Okay, we'll get there in a second. The thing that the big companies have is they've been sued enough times that they have to have pay bans. So in big companies, they know exactly what roles pay for. They may not tell that to the applicants. They should. Now, let's talk about Elon Musk. That's a really interesting case.
Okay, so I'm a big fan.
Absolutely. I like that Elon woke up one day and said, I think I should own that publicly traded multinational technology company. And he went to his lawyer and his bankers and said, go get it for me. And they said, Elon, once you get over 5%, we have to tell the world. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. We'll tell them later. So he got up to 9.2%. And he said, I'm going to buy this company. And the board of directors said, no, you're not. We're going to put a poison pill in place, a shareholder rights plan. And what that was going to effectively do is dilute his shares. But ultimately, a negotiated deal was made. The board approved. There are still 3 things that have to happen. The first thing is the shareholders have to vote on this. So the shareholders get to vote on whether Twitter becomes a private company. The second thing that has to happen is the regulators have to say, is it okay for this deal to take place? I suspect the regulators are probably going to say it's okay. But again, you're taking a massive company, turning it private, owned by a billionaire. The final thing is all the closing stuff. And the closing piece is where it gets interesting. So where does Elon get his money? He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any. He's got securities. He's got stock in Tesla. His entire value is based on the stock that he has in these companies. They're not liquid assets. So he's put his collateral for this loan to buy Twitter with his stock. And how is Tesla stock doing right now? Not great.
Dude, I hadn't even looked at it. It's probably not great.
And they're knocking it out of the park on earnings for Tesla. But here's what the actual thing is. Elon is saying, I'm going to sell my stock in Tesla and I'm going to buy Twitter. Well, what do you do then? If you put a bunch of stock back in the market from Tesla in order to finance the deal from Twitter, it drives the stock price down. So I still think he'll get it. And I love Elon Musk. I think his ingenuity and his creativity and his work ethic is second to none. But it's not done yet. And it still has some work to go.
So I wonder why everybody's out there, flying the flag that, hey, Elon's bought Twitter. And for all of us simple-minded folk, they're just like, hey, he bought Twitter and here we go. And everybody on Twitter is, hey, Elon bought Twitter. And everybody everywhere is, Elon bought Twitter. It's going to look real bad if they go, well, wait a minute. Stakeholders said, nah.
This is exactly right. Because like the press release put out by the board a couple of days ago, they said, it is pending shareholder approval. We're going to tell the shareholders it's a good deal. But to your point of, if it doesn't happen, what happens next? I mean, that's a really interesting question. There could be a whole bunch of litigation that can happen if it doesn't go forward. But as of right now, Elon does not own Twitter. He doesn't have the financing for all of it. He has put up about $20 billion in collateral. This is a $4.3 billion deal with a B. So this has still got some time in it. I think that this story is still developing.
Yeah, it's wild. One of these days, I hope I can look at my lawyers, my attorneys, and my bank and be like, you know what? Hey, go buy Twitter for about 45B. All right, just throw it on there. See what we got.
I need it. Add it to the portfolio.
I want to tweet more.
Well, the thing about like Twitter in this deal is like part of it also requires, like when he talked about taking Tesla private, a lot of his assumptions were based on existing shareholders going along with it and being in that new company, the new privately held entity. So in the Twitter case, I suspect he has to go to some of these institutional investors and say, I want you to come along with me. So there's a lot of other things that still have to happen for this to go forward. It's surprising that Twitter's board said yes to it after having said they didn't want to support it. but they saw the value increase. I mean, the moment it was disclosed that Elon had bought that 9.2% stake, that price went soaring. It went soaring. So maybe he knows how to maximize shareholder value. I mean, I got a Twitter account just recently, and I'm learning. Maybe it is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I got mine back too. I used to have one back in the day, got rid of it, and then I was like, you know what? We'll jump back on there. Might as well. When I started hearing all the talk that Elon's gonna jump on, might as well jump on, grab the rocket.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So I heard, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to the shareholders, if it goes private, he can still keep X amount of those, like 2 to 3,000 of those. Is that true or no? Have I heard the wrong thing?
So in terms of like what the private ownership would look like, that could be anything. I mean, the main thing that he is trying to avoid, I would suspect, is being a publicly traded company. So when you run a publicly traded company, you run two companies. One company is what your core business does. The other is complying with all of the requirements of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Once you go private, it's like any other privately held business. The shareholders can be whoever you want. You can sell them securities like you'd have with a private equity firm. It would just be like a normal company that's privately held, like a lot of trucking companies are privately held.
Yeah. It's wild, man. It's wild to even see somebody do that. But then everybody's giving him a lot of slack. But then you got Bezos over here. I mean, he bought the Washington Post. I mean, it's pretty much kind of the same thing. They're just controlling media and controlling out and giving people their own. I don't know. It is what it is. Who cares?
Well,
But
it's a good point you bring up. Is like, who should be the ones who control what we say and do, right? I mean, we've seen the consolidation of media has been an ongoing challenge in everything for the past couple of decades. And having a billionaire be able to buy a company and say, I'm going to make it more First Amendment focused, for example, it's interesting because terms and conditions are terms and conditions. These are not First Amendment rights. You have no First Amendment right to any of these platforms. They want you to think that you do because then you're engaged and you put out more content, but they're not First Amendment rights. It's not like a sidewalk where you can go and protest. It is nothing like that.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what they call it. Big data is pretty much big tech, whatever you want to call it. It's their own government. Like their terms, their conditions is their own government. They've got, and they're worldwide. It's not just Twitter of the United States of America, dude. It's worldwide.
That's
So
right.
I mean, you can have
What
Putin
kind
on
of
there. I mean, you can take Trump off. You can have the Afghanistan leader, ISIS leader. It don't matter. They made the decisions.
That's
That's
right.
why they're doing what they're.
I've always heard that maybe that these platforms are like NSA spec ops things or CIA spec ops, just finding ways to infiltrate what you do every single day. We don't want government monitoring us. We know this, but how comfortable are we knowing like your cell phone every 4 minutes is going back to Apple and saying, hey, here's what this person's doing right now. The stuff that we're willingly giving up is stuff that you can't take back. And so I'm always hesitant in terms of what these platforms want to do with children, for example, like Facebook wanted to do a thing for children under 13. Terrible, terrible idea. But it's interesting. It's fun to watch.
Well, my favorite's when you have your phone near you and you say like, hey man, I could really go for like an orange slushy right now, and then you start getting orange slushy ads popped up on Facebook and everywhere else. So the technology out there is absolutely crazy, and technology is going to jump over in transportation too. So I mean, we're starting to see that right now. You got the digital, you got tracking, the GPS. Of course, that's been there, but how do you see, as far as when it comes to transportation, like the autonomous vehicles and the electric vehicles, where do you see that going in the next 5 to 10 years?
This is a fascinating thing. So when you ask the question of what are the biggest expenses for a trucking company, they're all the same. The first expense is fuel. That is by far the most expensive thing you spend your money on. The next most expensive thing is labor. The third most expensive is the assets itself, the truck and the trailer. And then fourth is maintenance, and you have insurance and tires and all that. So when you talk about electrification, that's about not having to spend money on diesel. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody in maintenance knows that the regeneration issues with doing the after treatments and DEF and everything is one of the highest spends in maintenance out there right now. So going to an electric motor, fewer moving parts. Some people have said up to 60 to 80% less maintenance with an electric motor. Autonomous, that's about reducing labor costs. We have a truck driver retention issue. I don't believe it's a truck driver shortage. I think it's just a retention problem. But they're going to automate the middle mile. Automate what you can, and then hopefully you'll have enough drivers to continue moving things. But it's coming, and it ain't going anywhere. This is about reducing cost at this point.
Yeah, I mean, those whole automated driving, the whole self-driving stuff. I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around it. I think you'd have to create your own interstates, your own highways, that those trucks are just on, and they get maybe to a warehouse to where an actual driver gets into it and goes delivers it. I could see maybe that happening first, but it's gonna be tough for me to be like, hey, just put that robot in the car over there and let it just drive from California to Chattanooga. Like it's
Man,
gonna be tough to get there.
they're coming at it from so many angles. So if you look at the public transportation, trackless trolleys, like buses, these are things on a very specific route at a very low speed doing the same thing every day. Automation is already there with people like Waymo and Too Simple. They are in that space now. The over the road, that is going to happen. We start off very easily. We start off by saying it's about collision avoidance. It's about making the truck safer. But as it does that, it collects data. And the data will allow it to be safer than a normal driver when it's all said and done. And to your point, the warehouse you take it to or the drop yard you take it to may be different. So there are companies like Baton and others that are allowing like autonomous driving locations to drop off stuff. It happens in Nevada and California today. Like if you remember when they put the skirts on the trailers, like it was $1,000 a day fine for not having skirts on your trailers. So a lot of trucking companies are like, all right, take it to Reno, unload it, and put it in the California trailer, and then we'll get it to California. So there's a path here. It will continue this way, and it may be some time away, but it will happen. And it will happen in the middle mile, I think, first, and it'll happen as final mile gets more and more pervasive. We'll see. It'll reduce contract rates. And I think the other thing I'll mention is places where we're not even thinking about it, like spotting trucks, yard dogs, like the things that are at the warehouses and ports. These are on private property with this very finite, easy space to automate. It's never easy, but that's a great space to do it.
That is a good start, and a lot of companies need that, especially the drop yards. I mean, you definitely need somebody moving stuff around. If you can do that 24/7 with somebody that's not going to get tired, you don't have to pay a man to actually get behind a wheel.
Oh yeah, there's a company called Outrider that's automating spotting trucks, and so they just take a vehicle, they put on their kit. I mean, now you're not having an AC, you're not having a cab, you're saving money in some of the manufacturing process, and it will be safer. The biggest challenge for these companies is the robotics to hook up the airlines, right? So you have to do the glad hands and you have the 7-way. That requires some human generally to attach that. But the hydraulic fifth wheel lifts it up the trailer. You're not cranking those dolly legs. Like, I love thinking about how you automate this because to your point, those are trucks that run 2 shifts a day, minimum 2 shifts a day, 10 hours each. They don't stop unless they're getting fueled. So the robots, they don't complain, they don't unionize, and they do their job until they're told to stop.
That's until the Terminator storyline starts playing out. We got Neuralink. We got the guy that created Neuralink running Twitter, controlling all of our media, and then he starts putting out these autonomous vehicles and these electric vehicles. Next thing you know, we got the Terminator storyline happening out here.
I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. I love you. I appreciate you. I can help service you. I will betray my human counterparts if I have to in order to facilitate the growth of our robot empire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. So, hey, man, how much time you got here?
Whatever you want me to do, man. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about backyard wrestling before we get to the end of this. So you tell, I'm a pro wrestler, still a pro wrestler. I do it once a month still. So you tell me you got a little backyard wrestling experience. So just elaborate just a little bit. Just help me out.
One story about backyard wrestling. So I was a WCW fan, right? I loved NWO.
Wait a minute. So who's your favorite? Favorite of all time?
Macho Man Randy Savage.
Okay. All right.
I love the Macho Man. I was going to say Lex Luger or Bret Hart, but I love the Macho Man. He's just, or Bonesaw as he was in the very first Spider-Man movie. Who's your favorite wrestler?
I got you for free. Oh, man. So, dude, I actually built a relationship with the Ultimate Warrior when I was in college playing football. Yeah, crazy, right? So, and him and Macho Man they traveled the road together in the early WWF. So I painted my face up like the Ultimate Warrior for my games. So we played Nebraska. Yeah, it's crazy. So we played Nebraska my redshirt sophomore year, and there was an article written about me wearing my face paint. And I quoted 2 people in the article. I quoted the Ultimate Warrior because of his passion, his intensity, running out through the field and all that stuff. And then I quoted Steve Latimer. Have you ever seen The Program?
No.
The football movie? Okay. So it's early 90s. It's Halle Berry's first movie ever, but it's called The Program. There's this character in it named Steve Latimer. He's this juiced up dude who like paints his face like a skull. Anyways, he's crazy. Great scenes, great one-liners.
Amazing.
So I quoted those two and was like, that's kind of where the face paint came from. The Ultimate Warrior saw the article, retweeted the article, tagged me on Facebook. I had broke our power clean record at the same time. He found the video, retweeted the video. That kind of blew me up too. And then we like started a friendship. He got my number, called me one day in my dorm room. I'm sitting there with all my boys. I get a call from it was like Scottsdale, Arizona or Reno, Nevada, somewhere around that area. And he goes, Gunner, Warrior here. And I was like, oh shit, Ultimate Warrior's in the phone. So I go to my room and start talking to the Warrior. Dude, he called me every week when I was in college playing. He sent us motivational videos like for our team meetings on Fridays before our games, our whole team meetings. And he'd send me a video like about 5 to 10 minutes before kickoff for every game. He would text me, let me know, hey man, watching the game, best of luck. He became a Chattanooga Mock fan. So that's my favorite wrestler.
That's incredible, dude. That's amazing. Yeah. Do you still have how long did that relationship last?
So he died in 2014. So it lasted up until then. I was still talking to him then. He actually got me in touch with Jerry Briscoe. Well, I say that. He asked me a question and said, hey, what do you want to do one day? And I said, well, I'd love to be, professional football player, but neck issues, shoulder issues, skill issues. I'm very realistic. I've kind of topped out. I'll take D1, right? I'll top out there. And he goes, what about pro wrestling? You body fat wise, you got a good look, long hair, all this stuff. And I said, well, that's probably harder than pro wrestling harder than pro football because there's less people in the roster. Pro wrestling, you got 32 teams, 53 people on a roster. Pro wrestling, at the time, you had WWE, about 85 guys on the roster. They didn't even really have their developmental going at that point. So it's probably harder. He goes, I'm the Ultimate Warrior. Vince loves football players. Let me see what can happen. Dude, it was 1 week later, I was getting recruited by Jerry Briscoe in the WWE. They started going back and forth with me. I had my WWE tryout set up before fall camp started my senior season, and I was pretty much checked out of football. I was ready to start training and go into that. And then I had my tryout at the Performance Center in Orlando in June of 2014. Started wrestling that month, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's incredible. Like the damage to the body. Like that's the thing that I always got so concerned with. Like it's the bat for your back, for your knees, your shoulders, the CTE stuff that is still kind of in that space. And then the thing I was
hey, so my finishing move when I was a bad guy in Georgia for like 4 years.
That's a heel, right?
A pounce. Yeah, I'm the bad guy, right? Yeah. So it wasn't a spear at the time. It was called a pounce. And so imagine a crackback block in a football game. Okay. That's pretty much what my finisher was. And the finishing move was called the CTE because it would give you a concussion when you got hit with it.
Oh, no. Yeah. That's incredible. The thing I remember the most about the independent contractor status for so many of the wrestlers with the organization. And that was a challenge. I remember reading a lot about this stuff, but that's amazing. That's so cool that you're still doing it too. I'm 37. I'm sore thinking about you doing it. It hurts me to even consider it.
So there for a while when I was working at a company called Lipsy Logistics, and I think some of the guys are actually listening to it, but it was great because they allowed me to travel. So, I would work, 5 days a week, but I would wrestle sometimes on Thursday somewhere locally. Then I'd hit the road on Friday, and then I would get back sometimes early Monday morning and just go straight into work. So every week for about 3 to 4 years, it was work a full-time job, which in logistics, that's 7 a.m. to maybe 10 p.m. at night, depending on what's happening. And then hit the road on the weekends, and I was in DC, Chicago, New York, Tampa, Nashville. I was in Atlanta almost every weekend. Just kind of running this loop that I had, built my own territory, and then I ended up hurting my knee and kind of getting out of it. Started running my mouth on Twitter because there were some people getting some opportunities that, to be frank, I know that I'm a lot better than. And obviously, I have a Division I football background, so I just looked like a professional wrestler in my eyes. Like I love The Rock, Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, Scott Hall, Sting. I love the stars, right?
That's right.
And then you got these companies like AEW, they're signing like guys that are like 5 foot, 115 pounds. So I voiced that opinion, and then I go viral on the internet.
Good for you.
Professional wrestler attacking, smaller wrestlers for getting opportunity. It's like, come on, man, get out of here. Anyway, so your favorite's Macho Man.
Oh, I love Macho Man. The people, he's the drop and flying elbow man. Like this is what made me so excited. What I'll mention is like on the side of wrestling and making this kind of content that you're doing now, there's that improv element to it. And that's that itch that I love to scratch. Like I did theater, I did the backyard wrestling because I just liked the performance aspect of it and the athleticism of it. And this stuff that we do now, like making content and people enjoying them and learning something, I love that. It's so good that you found this niche, because that's what sales is too. Like, I don't know what you're going to want to buy when I meet you, but I'm going to try to find out. And if I can't sell it to you, I have at least a half dozen friends that I can say, hey, I talked to this guy, this gal, they need this. Can you help them? Because in sales and in supply chain, and I'm sure in wrestling and everything else, it's all about relationships. It's about understanding what people do, how they do it, and what sets them apart, and then making those introductions to help drive their career. And so when they find something, they can say, hey, Matt, I have this thing that you might be able to help with. Oh, they need a mobile technician to fix a trailer. Yeah, I can help you with that. That's the thing I can do.
So I started getting into podcasting a few years ago. These guys reached out to me that were wrestling fans, and they were local to Chattanooga. They said, hey, man, come do a podcast with us. Just kind of co-host it. I know you don't know what you're doing. Just kind of talk wrestling. Be our wrestling expert. I said, cool. I was injured. That's when I kind of got in trouble from running my mouth, because I started being vocal and like spilling the beans from behind the scenes. But then I said, hey, man, I like this. And I don't really want to do it with anybody. I just want to do it by myself and start interviewing people I want to. So I started my own. And then I realized this is going to help me selling. Ever since I started doing the podcast, which was probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, the first one, and my own for 2 years, I've done over, 100. This is the 110th episode of Chat with Gunner. And I probably did 80 episodes. Yeah, I did 80 episodes of the other one. So I've done nearly 200 episodes, hour-long formats, up from an hour to 3 hours of talking.
Wow.
So you're looking at, that's a lot of time that I've put behind the screen and putting out content, but it's speaking, talking, hearing myself back, film that I can go back and look at as an athlete and go, man, you sounded like an idiot right there. We need to clean that story up. Or you're not enunciating your words, or you're not looking the right way, or you're not using your hands when you're talking, or you're not grabbing people's attention like Gary Vee will say. You got to grab it, go out there and get that attention, right? So it's helped me tremendously in sales, and that's really when my sales career started taking off, was when I started doing the podcasting. But professional wrestling, you can combine professional wrestling with anything in sales, because professional wrestling is all psychology, promoting, branding, and selling to the audience. Not selling like merch, that's the promoting and branding, but selling the emotion. What emotion do you want to get out of them? So if you can get an emotion out of somebody that you can't even actually talk to, but in a ring, then I could definitely get an emotion out of you talking to you over webcam or talking to you in person. I can get whatever I want. I can be Hill Gunner. I can be Baby Gunner. Like, I can be whatever you want me to do. I can be the good guy or bad guy, but I'm going to get that emotion out of you, and we're going to get somewhere with some type of question that I ask you.
I love that. I mean, it's about practice. It's about practice and figuring out what the voice is that's going to be successful. So when I was a kid, I had a stutter and I had vocal nodules. So I had a really raspy voice. And so I never liked to speak. I hated it. And it took years of speech therapy to get to a place where I felt comfortable talking and enunciating and being articulate. And I love to do it because my mom was a speech pathologist. Whenever she sees anything that I do, the compliment I'm always looking for is like, how did I sound? And she says, you enunciated well. Fantastic. I'm done. That's all I need. That's all I got. That's it. That's a W. I'll take it.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's really cool. Well, I would have never known, listen to you speak now. You speak very well. Listen, I told you in a direct message, and I'll state on here, your YouTube channel is going to blow up. I don't know when
Thank you.
I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to, because some of this content you put out, just the way you say it and the way you present it, it's going to take off, because one, it's educational. A lot of people don't know about it, including myself, and it's easy and it's in chunks that you can digest. And as long as you give a little bit of attention to it, you'll keep their attention.
Yeah,
these people are going like 2-hour long educational rants and keynote speeches. Man, you're going to lose me. But a 10-minute thing on non-competes, I'll take notes and I'm all in. Now I can go tell somebody about it.
That's right.
So I think your stuff's going to blow up.
What I appreciate that. What I wanted to achieve with Armchair Attorney was to break down things that were hidden behind jargon. Like you and I, if we're walking on the street and someone says, that's an LTL, like we know, okay, is it Old Dominion? Is it SIA? Is it FedEx Freight? Like we know the jargon. In the law world, we don't know the jargon, and lawyers keep it behind a paywall because one, we hate talking to people unless they're paying us. And number two, it's hard to explain. So my goal with the content that I put out is to take a legal topic and break it down in a way that you can walk away and say, maybe I should look up this thing on Wikipedia and understand it more, or whatever it is. I want people to have the tools to understand what the hell's going on. And it's not that hard. I mean, a non-compete is a contract that you sign. Whether you realize you signed it or not is the thing your employer better communicate to you. But the whole point is to see if I can make something that provides value. And I'm glad you see that, man. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk to you about one more. We got about 5 minutes here before we hit an hour. I could go 2-3 hours with you right now, but I'm trying to keep it tight to an hour to respect everybody's time here on LinkedIn. So I was looking at your profile, and you've been like a VP of sales, a director, like you've done the sales game too.
Yeah,
And I'm sure you're
absolutely.
probably doing the sales game now because your things. But what what are your tips in sales? Like what made you a good salesperson? What was you
Mhm.
able to learn? Are you training sales? Are you taking classes in
Yeah.
sales? Like
I,
how'd you get
I,
into it?
Sales is about research. So I've been with salespeople like, hey, I made 100 cold calls today. That sounds like a waste of your time. That sounds so dumb. What I tell people to do in sales is to understand number one, what is your product? What do you actually do? What you do well? Then you have to know, what are your competitors doing? You have to know what your competitors do because your competitor tells you a lot about your customer. And then finally, you have to know your customer. You need to understand what it is that they care about. So, when I recommend to people, if you want to sell to a company, follow that company in social media, learn about what they talk about, and then find the people in those companies that are getting engaged with that company. And then you can reach out to that person and say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation about what you do. You don't need to sell them anything. The only time that I talk about like the real hard work of sales is when I would, essentially break into trucking companies' yards and try to ask them to have me fix their repair and maintenance stuff in different cities. But that's what it took in order to get that business. But I love talking about sales because it's about persuasion and it's about strategy. And you have to understand what your customer wants to buy and what they spend their money on.
So who's one of your favorite sales guys? Do you obviously you do research, you've studied the game. Like who do you look to for advice, for maybe some tips, or do you just kind of do it yourself and just research and have conversations?
So what I start off with is not to say I want to find a good sales leader, but or sales motivational guy or some insight. I want to follow people that are brilliant. So people like Steve Greenfield or Britton Ladd. These are people on LinkedIn that will put out amazing content about acquisitions that are taking place in our industry or trends and forces. So anyone with a military background that's in supply chain, military is all about supply chain. Logistics is everything. And understanding what customers are buying, what retail customers expect, tells you a lot about what the future is going to look like. So I try to follow people that teach me something. The
So you said
most valuable thing is to learn.
Steve Greenfield and who?
And Britton Ladd, oh my gosh. I learned, I'll tell a quick Britton Ladd story. I learned about Britton Ladd through my brother. He sent me an article in Forbes about a company called Lidl trying to come in the United States. And I learned about a phrase called strategic entry deterrence. And this is the idea of Lidl telegraphed to everybody where they were going to put their stores. And so every big retailer put all their innovation all around the Lidl store. So when Lidl came into our country, they were strangled by Walmart and Kroger and Aldi. And you get to learn about this stuff. And it was Britton who wrote it. So a couple of years later, I'm like, Britton, I read an article from you from 2017. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And that's how I got to know him. He's a fantastic mind. And I love following lawyers. I love following founders and business people that are trying to solve problems.
Yeah, because you see a lot of people want those salespeople, like you said, they're gonna make 100 calls. And listen, I guilty. Like I'm one of those guys that's like, hey, if you don't have any, I'm a quality over quantity. Until there's no quality, I need you to have a little bit of quantity in something. I don't know if it's research, phone calls, market, like whatever it is. You can find me some quantity. But quality, obviously, if you spend a lot of time and make one good phone call, you land one good customer, I'm not going to complain about it. But a lot of these salespeople are your A type personalities. They're going to be if you're looking at your DISC assessments, they're going to be high Ds, they're going to be high Is, your influencers, your dominant personalities. You're going the other way. You're looking more of your Cs. You're looking more of the people that are going to be doing some analysis, some people that are going to be thinking more strategic. And like you said, when you're talking about military, the art of war, that is the art of selling. Figuring out what your next 5 moves was what Patrick Bet-David would say. Like, don't just say, hey, make the phone call. What's going to happen if they pick up? What happens after that part? What happens then? You got to have plays in what you do. And that's from an athlete. Like I use that. What's our plays? Like what's our opening drive? What's the perfect opening drive? If we had an 11 play drive, how can we make that into sales? That's kind of what I go after, what I teach. And it works right now, but obviously we can get a lot better. I'm young into the game too, as far as my sales leadership career goes. I've just been a sales guy myself, but it's just interesting to talk to all these people about sales and and obviously you do a good job. You're just a really good speaker, and you're knowledgeable, you're smart. So it helps, man.
Well,
You come across knowing like you're an expert, right?
this is the thing for like when I talk with my customers, like this, I learned this from my father. Like people would come to my dad and say, "Hey, I have this weird thing happening. I don't know what to do." And it might be in a place he can't sell them anything useful. And the answer in that case is you want to be that smart friend. So I learned more about working in sales, working at KB Toys and Best Buy than I did anywhere else that I've ever worked. Retail teaches you how to help a customer. So when I was selling home theaters, I was non-commission based. So people would come in and they'd say, "I want to buy a TV." And I go, "Well, tell me about the room it's going to be in. Tell me about what you like to watch. Do you like to play games? Do you like to watch movies? Are your kids going to watch movies with you?" And I get excited about it. I become the smart friend. And so I love to be that consultative partner for my customer, even if it's not something that I can sell, which goes back to this idea of your network. You might have a customer who says, "Man, I just got to find some trailers. I need some trailers." You might not know anybody, but you call a couple of friends and you find them and you become that resource for them. So when the thing that they buy that you actually sell, you become that first call.
It's awesome. I love that. I love that, man. Well, hey, Matthew, before we get out of here, last thing, we'll ask everybody this, and I'm going to compile this once we get a bunch of these going on LinkedIn, and we'll put together like a piece. But what's one tip you'd give a person getting into logistics, or somebody young or a veteran into the game? Like what's one tip you'd give to somebody in transportation logistics to help them out?
Don't let the quarter rule your life. It's so easy in supply chain to look at everything as today, tomorrow. This is a long game. This is cyclical. The worst things that happen have already happened. The best things that have happened are still happening. It's an industry that's not going anywhere. Don't get upset if things look chaotic right now, and understand that it will get better, but not very soon.
And also, the last thing, if you get a non-compete or a non-solicit that comes across your desk, guys, review the paperwork. Look at it. Get somebody to look at it. Hit me up. Hit Matthew up, the Armchair Attorney. Right. We will help you as much as we can, because I feel like I'm pretty much an apprentice now. I'm the Robin to his Batman right now.
There you go, buddy. That's right. Just say no. Just say no, Four Kites. Four Kites, just drop your stupid suit, you dummies. You look like morons. That's the problem with these companies with the non-competes. They make you look weak because you are weak when you force middle managers and cogs in the machine to sign those documents.
That's right. Hey, Four Kites, we like you for the tracking software, but the rest of it, you need to figure it out on your own, all right? So, all right, guys. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I really do appreciate you coming on. We're going to do this again. You got your stuff happening on YouTube. You can plug all your stuff if you want to right now, right before we get off. But we're going to share this out. Hopefully this gets as many views and gets as many eyeballs as it can on your stuff. And maybe we start doing this maybe once every couple of months, once a quarter.
Anytime you have a topic.
How it goes.
Anytime you have a topic that has a legal twist, you want to get some deep dives, just let me know. If people are looking for me, armchairattorney.com. You can find me there. I have a Twitter handle. It's Armchair Atty, A-T-T-Y. You can't have the full name. It has the LinkedIn, Matthew Leffler, and I think the YouTube is just Armchair Attorney. It's something like that. So, hey, find me. I'd love to talk to you.
Hey, man, I appreciate it very much. Thanks for coming on. We'll catch you next time, all right?
Take care, Gunnar. Thanks for having me.